All right, good morning, everybody. The purpose of this video, we're going to take a look at topic 6.2 on how industry spread throughout Europe, and specifically in this video, we're going to look at the development of industrialization in Great Britain. All right, so let's start this by just trying to get a little bit of clarity on some definitions. There are going to be points in time where we're just going to talk about this as being the Industrial Revolution, but historians kind of like add a couple of levels to it. And so sometimes you'll see the beginning of the 19th century referred to as the first industrial revolution. This is primarily because some historians kind of see a second wave of this type of industrialization happening late in the century. For the most part, I'm just going to refer to this as the Industrial Revolution in general. When historians look at this, they talk about like the series of economic and social factors that are going to help promote the kind of industrial growth that's happening here. And like we've seen in some video, there is a major, I mean, I guess, benefit that the British have in terms of landforms and geography and geology when you get a little bit deeper into this, like literally deeper into the ground into this. There's a whole lot of waterways in England. There are more rivers that are here than what you get in other parts of Europe. And rivers are huge because that's going to allow there to be a lot more ease of transportation. Transporting things over land is slow and difficult because it's all literally it's horse powered vehicles, horse drawn vehicles. You can load more things onto waterways and take them downstream, downriver, and you can get a lot more transportation of goods that way, including the coal and the iron that they're going to need to sort of get this manufacturing process moving. It also helps out the British that there are huge coal deposits all over the country and that there's a reasonable amount of iron supplies that are there too. So what this really means is that when it comes down to the raw materials needed to build this industrial setup, in England, they've got a lot of those materials really easily at hand. They've also got a pretty big workforce easily at hand because there is the agricultural revolution that's gone on. So population has gone up thanks to the innovations in farming that we talked about back in Unit 3. There's also the putting out system or the cottage industry, like the little inset slide here from Unit 3, where you've got more people that are moving into towns from like the isolated countryside because they were looking for work. And it's just we're going to see this transition from work in household units in their homes to the work being done in factory units where you can put a lot more people to work, creating a lot more things. And then the development of the British Empire that we saw back in units. I mean, really, it's units 3 and 4 and the beginning of unit 5. The British Empire is huge and it's going to allow more materials and more money. And with that extra money, it's going to create a demand for textiles. So while in video, we've seen a lot of emphasis placed on metalworks that have been done, it is important to keep track of the idea that the first phase of this industrial manufacturing process, it's going to happen in textiles, just like we saw with the loom back in Unit 3. So when we look at the mechanization of this textile production, there's a couple of waves that come into this just in terms of looking at technology. And I know this is definitely in the economics thing, but technology has a role to play in here as well. In the 1760s, there are two inventions that really start to change, speed up the pace of production that's going on. This patent drawing is what this is. This represents a spinning jenny. And so like the old time spinning wheel where you would have one person taking raw wool and spinning it on this wheel to make thread. This is like the very traditional, man-powered way to do this. What the spinning jenny does is it allows this to kind of be done in a much more, I guess, efficient process where there's multiple spools of thread that's being manufactured over here. And this is going to get a little bit more efficient as time goes on here in the 1760s. Down here in the bottom right, what you've got is a water frame. The water frame is doing the same kind of job that the spinning jenny does, except the difference is it's water powered. Like water flowing down a river or a stream turning a water wheel, which gives the mechanical energy to do this. So we're not talking like steam powered engines just yet, but we are talking about things that are going to kind of create a more rapid process for this. And then speaking of steam engines, James Watt's steam engine here in 1769, it kind of like mechanizes all of this and kind of makes it run much more efficiently. We saw a little bit of video about this. And it's also going to create something that can run really 24/7, 365 days a year. And so this means there's a whole lot more textile production that's going to come into play. And it works so well here that it's going to sort of lend itself to all kinds of other manufacturings, including metalworks, because the only difference isn't going to be the energy source or the mechanical work. Is going to be what the output is going to be. By the 1780s, two more inventions to drop in here for you. Henry Cort invents a puddling furnace, which is kind of a weird name for something, but what the puddling furnace does, it creates it's a furnace to kind of heat iron ore a little bit hotter to get a more durable product for iron. And this is really just in the manufacturing process, not in the output. But what that means is that all these different parts that kind of go into the Watt steam engine, you can now make them with a stronger type of iron, which is going to let this machine work longer without breaking, because the breakage is one of the big problems they're still left to overcome here in the 1780s. And then by the time you get to the late part of the decade, I'm going to get one more time in here just so we can see what's going on. Edmund Cartwright invents the power loom. So this is going to, we'll get to steel production in just a moment, but the power loom, you can kind of see what's going on here. And if you back video up, if you remember the picture back from Unit 3, we would see one of these things, which would take like 2 or 3 people to kind of run one loom. Look, the threads coming in from the front and from the back, you can barely see it in here. Then the output of the cloth is kind of coming out one side of the machine. Raw thread here, cloth comes out the other side. What makes the power loom significant is going to be how it's the scale of it. Everything is being driven by these belts that are in the ceiling. These belts kind of go to this cog, which goes through the wall here, and on the other side of this wall, you've got a steam engine that is kind of working consistently to kind of keep all of these things running. The difference here is instead of being 2 or 3 people to run one machine, you're going to get 2 or 3 people to run a couple of dozen machines, because now you're just kind of supervising the machinery work, and this is going to produce so much more textiles than what they really ever saw before. And it really is just sort of tweaking the end manufacturing process on this, because this is going to be the same type of mechanical work for textiles that you're going to see in steel production to produce all of the variety of things that we were talking about, the video was talking about, from tools to saws to swords to little decorative trinkets to any of that kind of thing. So as the manufacturing pace picks up, they need to have new transportation systems to be able to get all these goods to market, because you can produce as much as you want to, but if you're not selling it, you're not really going to be able to maintain that. So in the first wave of this, there are canals. We saw some canals and some road building kind of taking place there in the 1700s. But by the 1820s and 1830s, they're kind of taking like the steam engine and they're putting it onto these locomotive trains and that are going to run on railroads. So George Stephenson's rocket, and picture replica here, but the rocket is this kind of like, it's kind of a novelty item where you can go and you can ride on the rails on this. But the big thing with the railroads is going to be they can transport goods wherever you need to go. You don't really need to have any kind of a waterway, river, canal system to do this, and railroads are going to be huge in the manufacturing process throughout. So the picture here, the map, all the red lines, this is the major railroad lines that are running in England by 1850. So by the time you get to the 1850s, this is kind of a said and done deal about the transportation network. And a huge step forward for this. There's also going to be the benefit of the stability of government that they've got. So when all this is going on the continent, you've got all the revolutions, the French Revolution and then subsequent revolutions that we'll see in Unit 6. But the continent, I mean, France is creating warfare all over the continent really for about 25 years, right? Well, during that time, in In England, they are kind of promoting from their government, they're promoting private initiative, people to want to go into business for themselves, people to want to invent things for themselves so they can make money. But this type of capitalist investment and this kind of, I guess, promotion of this mindset coming from the British government, this is really because England's been able to be stable since the Glorious Revolution back in 1688. That's lent itself in England to the 1700s being hugely stable and hugely able to contribute to, well, really what's going on in the long term over the rest of the British Isles. By the time you get to the 1830s and 40s, the human capital that, the human resources that people are putting into this, it's not just the factory labor, it's the engineers and the inventors and the capitalists, because you have to have builders and inventors and the money men to kind of be in the mix of this. And all of these people are being celebrated at things like the Great Exhibition of 1851. It's kind of like the World's Fair. So if you have ever had the opportunity to be at the State Fair of Texas, this is kind of the modern version of what's going on, where there are definitely rodeo, livestock show kind of things at the State Fair of Texas, but there's also kind of like the Inventors Hall, where they are showing off what's going on here. Or if you go to an auto show, they're going to show you the greatest and latest new inventions in the car industry. But what you get in the 1851 Crystal Palace exhibition is this a real major development display of all the inventions that are really kind of representative of the Industrial Revolution. The Crystal Palace itself is a new kind of thing, because the building, it's called the Crystal Palace because it's built almost entirely of steel and glass. And this is a new type of industrial building that we would kind of take for granted. But, thinking about this from the 19th century, mindset where all buildings are made of stone or wood, this is very, like, it's decorative and ornate, but it's very sleek and cutting edge as well. And the role of Parliament in this, through the development of capitalism and promoting commercial industrial interests. It is important to note that in Parliament, one of the reasons they're doing this is definitely to make England a stronger economic entity, but it's also because the wealthier people in Parliament, they are now mixed into these commercial and industrial interests. And so the powers of government have the ability to make themselves wealthier and more influential through their economic investments by the government. So it's a little bit of a cynical take that's going to go on here, and we will see that there's going to be some criticism of this type of mindset that comes in as you get a little bit later into the 19th century. But where we are right here in this topic, all this means that Britain is going to maintain its dominance over the rest of Europe really for the next century to century and a half. Thanks for listening.